My friends, I am so grateful for this journey that we have been on this fall, especially in light of this day center opening today, and especially in light of Tuesday being election day, that we are in the midst of this conversation of what it means to love well. I'm so grateful for the territory that we've been covering. So for today, I just wondered, does anyone have a family that they grew up in? Anyone? I do too, yeah. Has anyone ever experienced time in your family? Have there been times that have been confusing or unclear or even painful or not knowing how to navigate things? Anyone had those times? Yeah, me too. Yes, welcome to the beautiful reality, the messy reality of being part of a family. So I'm so excited for where we're headed today. Today we get to explore this landscape of becoming we and how we love well within our families. So this will be an opportunity to see how we understand that landscape as people who follow Jesus. So how do we interpret that and how do we navigate that, and then move towards how we can actually start to do that even better, just even today. So Pastor Abby D'Ambroso is with us to lead us into that landscape. She is my best friend. Whether or not you realize it, I've talked about her in sermons here as I've shared about my life. And I've known her for a while. We first met on our first day of seminary in 2003. And so we've been on very similar trajectories since then. She just moved from here in Washington to Maine, like on the other side of the world. So she, with her two kids and her husband, as her husband Will has started to teach political science at Bates College. But today, Abby is back in the Northwest, and we are and we are so excited. I'm so glad that you get to know her and that we get to do this important, tender work together today. So you excited? Yeah. Woo! Me too. All right, Abby, why don't you come up and let's pray. God, we do take a moment to let our bodies show up once again, so we roll our shoulders back and feel the warmth of our feet in our shoes. God, we show up and we open ourselves up to how you will speak in these minutes before us. We name that our families are an incredible gift for which we say thank you. And we name that our families can be an incredible challenge for which we say, help us, Lord. So God, speak to us now through Abby, through your Spirit, in this time that we share with you and with one another. Amen.
Amen. Mm-hmm. Our lector is going to come up and share with us Paul's words to the Ephesians.
But now, in Christ Jesus, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace. In his flesh he has made both groups into one, and has broken down the dividing wall, that is, the hostility between us. He has abolished the law with its commandments and ordinances, so that he might create in himself one new humanity in place of the two, thus making peace, and might reconcile both groups to God in one body through the cross, thus putting to death that hostility through it. So he came and proclaimed peace to you who were far off, and peace to those who were near. For through him, both of us have access in one Spirit to the Father. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are citizens with the saints and also members of the household of God, built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the cornerstone. In him the whole structure is joined together and grows into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are built together spiritually into a dwelling place for God.
So I understand that this fall you've been talking about what does it mean to love your neighbor. And I don't know about you, but I love a lot of my neighbors, and I find it pretty easy because I like stories and I like people. And so I can sit down and I can talk to anyone and have a good conversation. People on the bus, people at the hospital, people at the grocery store. I find out their story, their life, and I find it easy to love them. But I will tell you, I have a hard time loving some of my neighbors. Particularly, my mother and I have this thing where we know each other so well, we know all the buttons to push She, unlike anyone else in my life, can get me frustrated within like 30 seconds. She doesn't even have to say a word. She just shows up at my door, and already I'm just about ready to tear my hair out. Anybody else with a relationship in your family like this? Yes, I love my mother, don't get me wrong. I absolutely adore her. But dear God in heaven, I need some distance from my mom. She's a lot to deal with. I love her. Here's the deal. There's no one that I love more than my mother, and there's also no one that is harder for me to be around because we are so, well, let me just say it, alike. She drives me crazy for all the reasons that I look at myself and I go, oh my gosh, what did I just do? What did I just say? I see it in my mom, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just don't want to even see this. The thing is that our families have all sorts of neighbors for us to love. And everybody in a family sees things differently. Maybe you have a sister or a brother, maybe you have cousins or aunts or uncles, and all the people in your family see things in different perspectives. I bet that in your family, I would almost guarantee it, that in your family you have people who are voting on Tuesday for opposite candidates. Anybody else have a family like that? Yep. And this political system that we're in, and the whole conversation we're having as a country right now, it's had us so divided. It can be hard, even in that kind of thing, in the context of the election. And yet, Paul says, you are fellow citizens. Fellow citizens. It's like together citizens. When you look at the word, you're together citizens with all the saints. With all the saints. And the saints aren't just like people who are perfect. The saints are the people that God loves. So, folks, how do we love those together citizens, those fellow citizens? And not just the people who are in red states and blue states, but the people in our extended family and in our immediate family. Now, this is the question, right? This is a big question. And it's sometimes easier to proclaim peace to those who are far off. Like, hey, peace to you. Glad I don't have to hang out with you. Have a good time Thanksgiving. I'm going to Hawaii. Right? Sometimes it's easier to proclaim peace to those who are far off than to those who are near. Easier for me to hang out with my neighbor than to hang out with my mom. It's not as much at stake. There's no history there. There's no pain and sorrow and the ways that we've failed each other and the shortcomings. Not just the ways that she's failed me, but the ways that I have failed to love her. Oh, all of those old griefs and sorrows that well up, even if I'm not conscious of it. But Jesus does give us these words, love your neighbor as yourself. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for this opportunity to practice this over and over and over again. Families are complex, they're challenging, and being around family members, I don't know about you guys, but it takes me right back to previous days and previous behaviors. It's like I can be an adult and competent and funny and practical and all the things I want to be, and then I'm around my family and I feel like I'm 16 again. Yes? Are you with me here? Brings out all of these old behaviors and patterns. Well, thank God that Jesus is there. Jesus is here to bring us all together. Now, I'm going to show you a picture. Here's my family. This is the family that I have chosen. That's my husband, Will, and we've been together since we were 18, so 17 years, actually, as of today. This is our anniversary of when we started dating. So he's in Maine right now with our two children, August and Greta, who happen to be godchildren of Sarah and Jason. So they are dear people. We have chosen some family in our life, and these are the ones that I picked, and so I'm pretty darn happy to have them. They're pretty great. Now, everybody comes from a family, though. You know, you have your family you've picked, the ones you've married or are with for a long time, maybe your friends that feel like family. But we all are born into a family you don't get to pick, right? And I come from a pretty intense family system. I've got some really interesting things that have happened in my family. Now, by family system, this is a term that I'm going to use. And by family system, I mean not just these people. And actually, these people are the ones that I spend my most time with. But for the purpose of the work that I am doing, I need to be paying attention not just to them, but also to my sisters and me, my relationship with my mom and her generation, my dad, and then also the next line up, my grandmother and her siblings. Even if they're not alive anymore, those people who have gone before have influenced my family. Their stories continue. And so, yep, there they are. These are some of my ancestors. Maybe you can see some likeness in there. These dear people were in Chicago. That's my grandmother and grandfather, my dad's parents, my Oma and Opa. That's his mom. I think I kind of look like her. I never thought I did, but I think I kind of do. I never thought I took after that side of the family. I was told I took after my mom's side because look, don't I look like her? That's my great-grandma. My great-grandma, not even my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and there she is. So I do take after some people in my family, the women in my family, strong, courageous women. I've got some great stories. But my family system, like I said, is pretty intense. And actually it turns out that there are a lot of people, when you get down to it, there are a lot of people in my family system who actually don't talk to each other at all. They just don't. Like my mom went for 20-some years without once speaking to her own mother. Okay, like whoa, right? Like what would provoke you to not talk to your mom, even on the phone, for 20 years? What would provoke you to say, no, I won't go to her funeral. I'm in town, but for the sake of the family, I'll just leave well enough alone. Intensity, right? I mean, like that's some pretty intense stuff that we're dealing with. And lo and behold, it is borne out. So I'm going to show you guys this little picture. This is called a genogram. You can look these up. Sarah knows how to draw these. She's done her own. And this is just a little piece of my genogram. I'm just going to show you a couple things here. Now, this is not including my grandparents. This is just a simple one. I'm going to show you. I'm going to have you guys doing this in just a minute. So I want you guys to be able to see. So this boxes mean man. And there are some things for transgender, but I can't remember what it looks like. So if you have people who are figuring that out, just do the best you can with the symbol. But box is man, okay? So here's my dad. His name is Gary. Gary was married to Melanie, my mom, who looks like that woman. I wonder if you could, you won't see a picture of her but until later. But she does look like her. And so my mom and my dad were married, and they adopted a daughter, my sister Jennifer, who's right here. And Jennifer, you should know, she's deaf. And she has some learning disabilities and all sorts of interesting things. So although she's oldest, she doesn't really act like the oldest. And then my sister Anna, who is 3.5 years older than I am, who is like way put together and amazing and like organized. She was valedictorian of her high school class. Like she's super smart. Went to college with Sarah, actually. And then me. And then 9 years younger than I am, my mom and my dad divorced, and there was a really big break in there. And my dad, actually, I didn't see my dad after the age of 2 until last year. Yeah. So that was pretty intense also. So there's this huge distance, there's cutoff, right? Which was like really intense when we bridged that cutoff. So there was a divorce. Really messy, awful, terrible divorce. My family left the church for years because the pastor took my dad's side. La, 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 la. It's a long story. It's very intense. So my mom remarried to this guy named Colin, and then I got my little sister Katie. She's 9 years younger than I am. She's my half-sister in my family, so I have a collect all kinds kind of sister thing. So I've got an adopted sister has the same parents, and a half-sister. Lucky me, it's pretty awesome. Now, my mom is really good at getting married, and she's also really good at finding people that she looks at them and she just sees the best in what they could be. But it's not very good for the reality of things. So my mom saw the good in this guy, but then she was like, oh, wait, actually, no. So then they're divorced. And then there was another guy, oh, wait, actually, no. And then there was another guy, oh, wait, actually, no. And then there was another guy, now she's still married to him. Yay! So 5 times married, 4 times divorced. My mother is an eternal optimist. God bless her, she's amazing. But I shouldn't have been surprised because my mom is not, my grandmother was married more than once. And actually, when I go deeper in the family tree, if I were to show you pictures and do the whole massive family tree, you would see that my grandmother Maxine, she's one of like 10 kids, and all of them had at least 2 significant relationships. All of them. And that's really unusual for their day and age. They were either divorced or the person died, but then they remarried, like all of them, all 10 kids. It's pretty intense, right? And so my grandmother Maxine was no different. She was married to Honk. This is in Indiana, he had a big nose. And Honk and Maxine had Terry, and then Mel, my mom, as they call her back there, and then my Aunt Beth. When my grandmother was pregnant with Beth, when Honk was killed in a car accident. And the story goes that he was on his way home from his mistress's house. And the day that Beth was born, she was also in the hospital with a boy who's somewhere over here, right? Like he should be on the tree too. So there's some uncle somewhere, I don't know. But that's the story. So he was killed. And then she remarried some years later to Bob, who was Lutheran. This is how my family became Lutheran. They were all Anabaptists over here, like Amish Mennonite brethren, those folks. But she remarried to Bob, who was Lutheran. That's how my family became Lutheran. They had John and Marcia. So my mom has an older sister, a younger sister, and then a half-sister. There are 4 girls in her family, too, which is an interesting thing, and we'll come back to that. Okay, so there's some pretty intense stuff in here, and are you like interested in this? It's kind of interesting, right? Okay, I'm not the only one. I find this endlessly fascinating. This is like the research project of my life. Now, I was raised a far way from any of these people. I did not meet in person any of these people until I was 18. I was raised in Oregon. My mom's from Indiana. We just didn't go. We didn't have money. Really, my mom didn't want to go. And for good reason. There was good reason there. There's a lot of abuse in that family. And my mom is a truth teller. She's the black sheep of the family. And she just tells and tells and tells and tells and tells because the truth is going to set you free. But it also means that there's going to be some pushback. And people who tell the truth are not always welcome at the family table. So if that's you, I'm standing with you. And I tell you, you're always welcome at Christ's family table. You should know that. It's been a word of salvation for my mother. So when I was growing up, I didn't grow up with one aunt or uncle or cousin, not a grandparent. I had to adopt my family members. So I have a habit of picking them up along the way. And I have some good people in my life because God sent some good people into my life, including the church, which we later returned to and found some folks there. That's who we would go to Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving. My Sunday school teacher, Shane Fritz, and her family would have us in. They were amazing. I'm always thankful that we were taken in. And all that was okay. I mean, it was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't ideal, but it was okay, right? Until this day. So there I am. That's at the seminary. I was 23. That's my mom. Those are 2 on that side are my sisters-in-law. And then there's my sister Anna, my little sister Katie, and my roommate from college, Wendy, who was my maid of honor. And they all stood up with us at our wedding. And one of the things is that, at some point, it came to me. I was like, oh, man, I'm getting married. And what's my model for marriage? Dun, dun, dun. What am I going to do? And it wasn't like I could look to my husband's family because his parents were divorced too. So it wasn't like he had a huge model for how to keep a marriage together. And I knew how to get married, and for my mom, I knew how to get divorced, right? This is what I knew from my family. And I kind of like that guy I showed you a picture of. I really like him. And I wanted to stay married to him. And so there was some work that I needed to do. And it started in seminary in a class around this very issue. And I remember drawing this huge, massive thing of all the people in my family and calling my mom, hey, Mom, what's that story? Who are these people again? And what? And I just remember being oh my gosh, this is hopeless. There is no way, because no one's stayed married. There are none of those people who are oh, we've been married for decades. And, no. And when they talk about marriage, it's well, I put up with him. Oh, I didn't want that either. I wanted love and commitment and valuing of each other. So I was okay, what am I going to do about this? And so I started to work on this family systems theory. And I started to read about this thing called family systems theory that was created by this guy, Murray Bowen, who was a psychiatrist, a psychologist. He studied families, and he treated families, but he started doing this research, and he realized that the people he was doing research with were doing better than the people he was quote-unquote treating. So he stopped treating people and just started doing research, which is great. And then it was picked up later by this guy, Ed Friedman, who found out that how we treat our families is how we treat our churches and our synagogues and our workplaces and all of those things. Any system where you are interacting with people, you bring the habits of your family to that, and vice versa. And I was oh man, I'm studying to be a pastor. I don't want my family stuff. I don't want a church to look like my family. I don't want to, my family stuff is too intense, right? I don't want that. I was Lord, help me. I need some healing here. Now, Murray Bowen observed 8 different dynamics in families. And I'm not going to cover them all today. I'm going to give you a few examples of some of the dynamics. You should know that this is endlessly fascinating stuff, right? So there are books written about this, and I can give you recommendations after. Actually, I'll just give you one now. There's one called Growing Yourself Up. It's a recent book. It's by Jenny Brown. If you really are enjoying this, her stuff, chapter by chapter, takes you through challenging times in a life. Okay, so that's some good stuff. That's Growing Yourself Up. It's a good place to start. Okay, but I knew I needed to do my work because I had some important stuff coming. Not only did I want my marriage to work, but we were hoping to have children. And indeed, here they are, right? So you saw pictures early. So here's Greta and August. And I was okay, if I want my kids to grow up with this, a good, healthy family, if I want to be married, if I want to be a pastor, I need to do this work. So it really held my feet to the fire. Seriously, I would have walked away from this work and done many other things because it was so darn painful and hard. And I spent a really good long year, crying and pretending that nobody could see me. I would go to my apartment and I'd shut the door and I'd sleep, because I was working so hard on all of these things and confronting and taking out the family skeletons from the closet. Yeah? And I was taking them out, and I was learning to waltz with them. It's hard stuff. It's hard stuff. But I do it because I love these 2 people right here. And I want their relationships with their family to be beautiful. I want, actually, for the 2 of them, I want them to be teammates and buddies. I want them to be kind to each other. I want, when they're 80, I want them to be calling each other on the phone and being oh my gosh, my hip, and oh, I'll be right there. I want that for them, right? I see people who have these beautiful sibling relationships that carry them through their lives. I'm I so want that for my kids. I want that 100%. But it turns out, this is the quirk of parenting, the awful quirk of parenting that nobody tells you until afterwards, is that you actually have 0 control over that. I cannot control their relationship. And it turns, what's that? Dang it. I know! It turns out the very best thing that I can do for my children and their future is to work my own family relationships my relationships with my siblings. What? It's like this. If you want your kids to visit you in the nursing home, go visit your parents in the nursing home. If you want your kids to have a healthy relationship with their spouse, work on having a healthy relationship with your spouse. If you want your kids to be buddies, you have to learn how to be buddies with your own sisters. Easier said than done. Although I do love my sisters, and you should know this. I love them, yeah. You should know this about me. So here we are. This is me meeting my sisters coming home from the hospital. That's Jennifer and Anna and me as a baby. And they're getting presents. And look at how pleased Jennifer is to have a baby. She's like, look, I've got a little sister. And Anna's like, what just happened? I love this. Now, here's the thing. Triangles, I'm going to talk to you guys about triangles. This is one of the 8 dynamics. We are primed for a triangle because there are 3 of us and then 4, okay? So there are lots of different ways to do triangles. And I'm going to show you something really interesting. If I can find my marker, which seems to have disappeared. Is it there? It was. Uh-oh. No, it's right here. Oh, there it is. I outsmarted myself. So here's the deal. When you have, I'm going to put myself up here. Abby, you always get to go at the top of the triangle. So here's the deal. When you are with a person, let's say I'm with my sister Anna. Anna's on the left, Katie, then me. If Anna and I are together and we are so together that we start to have some friction, like we're not letting each other have differing opinions, then the tension in that dyad, those 2, pops out to a third person. Guess who it's going to be? Katie, right? And this is the nature of triangles in relationship, is that when there's tension between 2 people, whether it's because you're too close or too far apart, then it bumps out to a third person, okay? So what happens is that there might be some tension here, and then boop. So Anna and I can't talk about it, so I'm going to talk with Katie about it. About Anna, right? Anybody else do this in your family? I guess I'm the only one. Okay. This happens all the time. Now, the interesting thing is that, when there's, so let's say Anna and Katie, they're 12 years apart, and they are they see things so differently. Katie only texts, Anna emails, she's not on Facebook. What? These 2 have some distance, so what do? Boom, they talk to me. And for a long time, I was really concerned with this relationship. I was like, oh, I want my sisters to be friends. I want them to be together. I want there to be peace in the family. I'm a middle child. Right? I wanted them to agree. I wanted to be that bridge. And I exerted a lot of energy towards this side of the triangle. But it turns out, much like with my children, I have no control over this side of the triangle. I can try and I can interfere and I can talk till I'm blue in the face, but it turns out that I actually have no control over what my sisters do in their relationship. But what I do have control over is my relationship with each one. And so the rule of triangles is this. You work with your sides of the triangle. So I talk with Anna about Anna. I talk with Katie about Katie. And I try not to talk with Katie about Anna or Anna about Katie. This is the theory. Now, triangles happen in all sorts of places. And this is one of the things that I was investigating, because I find that there are 3 things, and we're going to get to all 3 of these. There are 3 things that I use to approach my intense family system, which is the research project of my life. I use curiosity, I use responsibility, and I use grace. Those are my 3 approaches. So my curiosity when I approach my sibling relationship is, what's going on in my family? What do things look like in the past? What are the patterns that I'm falling into? What are the birth order things going on? How am I interacting in the triangles that are going on? And what do I want? What do I hope for in my family? So curiosity. Now, before we move on, how am I doing on time here, Sarah?
It's late, but I want you to do your stuff and we'll figure it out.
Oh man, you guys, I could talk about this for a long time. I want to give you a chance to do a quick sketch of your own family for just a minute. So just do your parents and your siblings.
If you grab a bulletin, you should have an insert and a blank on the back. I'm going to grab some more families and pen just to make me.
So put your square on the left, your circle on the right, that's mom and dad, or dad and mom, and then underneath, however many siblings and where you fall. And you could take a long time and do this with a big piece of paper. You could use your whole living room wall for a little while and to draw it all out with everybody. And it would be endlessly fascinating, I'm sure. It shouldn't take you too long. Raise your hand if you need more time. Anybody had like 10 siblings out there? That one takes a long time. So I want you also on this piece of paper, this is your research project about your family. And I want you to think about, I want to know more about, I want you to complete that sentence. I want to know more about. Okay, so maybe it's about your siblings or your parents or your cousins or the family story of how they immigrated, or it could be around money or work, like something that's going on in your family or with you that you're curious about. You know, what's your family story around buying a house? What's your family story about having kids? What's your family story about death or birth? What's your family story around relationships or jobs? Or how much time you stay at work? All of those things. You know, what's your research project? What do you want to know more about in your family right now? So I want you to write down like at least like 2 or 3 things. Just jot them down. And again, raise your hand if you need more time. You guys seem to be doing pretty well here. Okay, we're going to keep going here. So the question, can I have slide 10 up, Rob? Yes. Thank you. I know I'm skipping around. Sorry about that. This one? Yeah, look. She's like, what? And he's like, oh, I hate this. You should know that as you do this, you're going to get some pushback in your family. When you're asking questions, you're going to have somebody in your family who's like, oh, I don't even want to talk about this. It's hard and it's intense, okay? So just know that when you start to do this work, you will get pushback. You should know that. Okay, now on to slide 11, I think. So 12, sorry, we're going on. Okay, so I already talked to you about curiosity. Take it on as a research project. What's happened in my family? How am I interacting? What have I received? Okay, responsibility. Now, I already talked to you a little bit about responsibility. In triangles, I cannot be responsible for what other people do. I can also not be responsible for what other people think about me. As a wise person once said to me, and this does contain a little bit of a bad word, it's none of your own damn business what anybody thinks about you. So you do this work not because it pleases other people, but because it is the work that is before you in order to make peace with those who are far off and with those who are near. So working sides of triangles when there's distance, when there is conflict, when there's enmeshment, when things are too close and you can't have your own opinion or do your own thing, all of those things you just keep doing what you're going to do. Now, in the case of my sisters, you'll notice that I had that picture earlier of Anna and Katie. Well, where's Jennifer, right? Well, she's kind of like the satellite sister who's like out there on her own. And So that's Jennifer. And I have in my life tried more recently, one of my research projects and responsibility is to take responsibility for connecting with her. Regardless of what my other sisters do, I want to have relationship with all of my sisters, and so I need to take responsibility for connecting with her. Now, she's not necessarily going to call me back, but that doesn't really matter. Whatever she does, she does. But I am going to call her, and I'm going to connect with her, and when I can, I'm going to make time to see her, but I'm also not going to overfunction. Yeah? Because the thing is that my sister, with her differently abled part of her life, she's deaf, she has learning disabilities. Throughout my life, she was treated almost like a younger sister or a peer. And her life has been very difficult. There's no mistaking that. She's suffered through things that I have never suffered through. She's overcome so many things. But she has also been treated as someone who doesn't always have it all together. And one of the major things in my sister relationship with her is taking responsibility for what I want to do. So a couple years ago, I hosted Christmas for all of my family, and it was Christmas, and I'm a pastor, and I was like, oh my gosh, right? And what I said was this. I said, look, you are all welcome at my house. I am hoping that you will all come, but I cannot take responsibility for getting you here or providing you accommodations. So I said what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. I took responsibility. And then the hardest part was not stepping in to make sure that all of my sisters were there, because I really wanted them to all be there. It was a dear hope of my heart. And yet, I needed to hold fast to that intention. So what was I going to do so that I didn't underfunction? What was I going to do so that I didn't overfunction? Being clear about what I would and wouldn't do. And I need to do that with all of my sisters, actually. Because youngest sisters, what do you want to guess? Overfunctioner or underfunctioner in the family system? But it turns out my younger sister is actually not an underfunctioner in the rest of her life. She's actually an incredibly competent, outgoing, successful person. She's amazing. And she just gets pigeonholed into that. Remember when you were saying to each other in the introductions what your family system place was? How your family sees you is not the full truth. You are more than what you are in your family. So when I interact with my younger sister, I have to be careful that just because she's younger than I am, I don't pigeonhole her into that under-functioning thing. Oh, I'll take care of that. No. She's actually really good. She can take care of me. It's great. So, yes, the question that I want to have for you then, can we have the next slide, please, Rob? Is values and intentions. If you think about your values and your hopes, your intentions, how then do you want to act? So I want you to write this sentence. I want to act in the following ways. And you can think about specifically with family members, like with my mom, I always want to be gracious toward her. With my older sister, I want to be clear and I want to connect with her. With my younger sister, I want to assume that she functions just fine. So how do you want to act? And just take a little minute to fill that question out. We're going to move on because we're short on time. Grace, though, is the final thing. This is what pulls it all together, what allows me to do this work in my own family. The grace that God has for me in my shortcomings when I fail to love my neighbor as myself, when I fail to love myself. The grace of God is given to me. And I will tell you that I have this intensity about my family system because I so love my sisters and I want to be close with them, and I live in Maine and they live in Boise and in Portland, Oregon. So they're far away and I can't just pop over for dinner, and I can't just hang out with them, and I can't just be there when something goes wrong. So I have a lot of intensity in my family relationship, and I need that grace for when I fall short. And we don't have a lot of time together. And when we do, it's we're just hanging out and we're trying to and then it's time to leave, right? So what I do in order to remember God's grace for me is that I look for God's grace in sending me sisters in other places. Because I don't have the luxury of making sure, like I can't control what my sisters do, right? So I call my sister Anna, and she's so busy with her kids, I may not hear from her for like weeks. Like she may not return my phone call for weeks unless I tell her, it's really important, call me back immediately. I love my sister, I want to have a relationship with her, but I cannot be desperate. Because remember, if you chase after someone, what happens? They just want to run away. They're like, it's too much, right? So I use that, I call attention to my own intensity in this longing for relationship with my sisters, and I'm like, okay, well, how can I find other sisters in my life? And God has actually sent me sisters, namely that lady right there, who I actually do call sister. And look, here we are, just cracking up. Isn't that great? That's like closer to 2003, because we're all there.
And I was very young.
We were so young, Sarah. But God sent me a sister there. These are some ladies that I love in Skagit County, some sisters that God has sent me as friends when I moved north from here. Some sisters there from my knitting group that have become like sisters to me. So it's not just those that I have on the page, but the people that I have picked up along the way that act in sisterly ways toward me. And I tell you, some of these people I talk to far more than I ever talk to my blood-related sisters. So I need to give myself grace when I fall down. I need to give my sisters grace. And the phrase that I use to give my sisters grace is, well, that's just what they do. That's just what they do. Anna can't call, that's just what she does. It's what they do. And so I just kind of normalize that for myself, lower my expectations, be grateful for what I have. And where I feel that thing of like, oh my gosh, I have no friends, I have no sisters, I call up Sarah. Sister, I need a chat. And I thank God that God has given me sisters of the heart. So I want to go on to the question then here. So as you think about your own relationships, the forgiveness that's needed, letting go of something, lowering the intensity, lowering anxiety, lowering the expectations, who are the people you want to give grace to in your family system? You already know that at the top of my list is my mom, right? But who are the people for you that you want to give grace to? Make sure you include yourself. Finally, the last slide. So this is a lovely picture that I took from around Portland, Maine. This is the Portland Headlight. And I love this picture because it is a lighthouse and a home right there. Some stormy seas have beat upon that shore, and it is still there. That is God's love for me, shining a light, guiding me home. And there is room for me always at that house of God's love. Here's the thing, friends, sisters and brothers, fellow citizens of the saints, members of God's household. Here is the word for you from Paul, paraphrased with the Abby D'Ambroso version. So then, you are no longer strangers or aliens or black sheep or martyrs but you are fellow citizens of the saints and members of the household of God. And in Christ is our peace, and we are brought together. Thanks be to God.